established for the government thereof, that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution and laws of said state, and not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of my knowledge and ability, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as Planning and Zoning Administrator, Subdivision Administrator, and Code Enforcement Officer, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Again, welcome, Dr. Robin, and again, I've sat down with you for a few minutes, so I'm looking forward to working with you for the next however long, so appreciate it. I ask you to encourage council members that have or haven't yet, please feel free to stop by and say hello. So, there you go. I think it's very important that we all have a free-flowing conversation that we can have with our planner. It's a very important position. There are really two faces to the village. One is Cheryl's, and one will be our planning and zoning administrator. So, and Shelley and Tim, and going back, they've all done a great job for us. So, we're going to continue moving forward. I think this is Shelley's last meeting, so she will be here till Thursday. So we can appreciate everything she's done to get us certainly past a couple items to get done some of the big items, a bunch of smaller things, obviously. So, okay. So item number 6, discussion with the engineer on stormwater, and Bonnie is here. For those that have not met her, she's right here. So I know I had sent over a question, Cheryl. Did you forward that on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which was the thought around, there was some discussion on whether or not we needed annual inspections of the stormwater facilities, like the ponds, etc. I think is what we had asked for. Not the ponds, but the retention ponds, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere along the line there was a recommendation that perhaps we're only one of the few that do that, and not to do it, that we didn't necessarily have to do it.
Are you specifically talking about like the village's ponds, like the Dogwood and the town
Was it the
hall?
ponds or was it the retention ponds?
The retention ponds.
Yeah, the retention ponds. So is it the villages? Is it all of them?
Yeah, as we dug into the questions, the village has an agreement with the state, the Department of Water Quality, for Dogwood Detention Pond and this one behind Village Hall. And I sent Robin and Cheryl an email with that attachment and just kind of broke it down to exactly what you need to be doing. But it's slightly different than what the village requires of HOAs and businesses. Annual inspections are not in the agreement with the state, but you do have to do monthly inspections, but they're not written reports. So it's just slightly different, but you do have an agreement on file with them, the
Okay.
state for this.
When we approve a new subdivision, we have to make sure that it meets stormwater criteria. And you look at the plans before we give a preliminary plat approval.
Mm-hmm.
After that, are we done as far as being involved with the subdivision retention pond?
Yeah, let me pass out a few things that I brought. And I did answer your questions in an email, but I don't know if you had a chance to see them.
I was looking for it, couldn't find it.
I just sent it today at lunch. So, but I can actually read through these and read my answers if you like. That might help some too. But
We just don't know what we're supposed to be enforcing, what is not. It's past our scope of work, and then what we're supposed to be doing for ourselves, specifically for the town hall and the park.
right.
There is one retention pond at the park, but there's also a pond which serves as a retention pond in the original design.
That's the larger pond, right?
The large one that's always got water in it.
Yeah. So there, let me take that. That's the maintenance agreement that the village signs with each new development, whether it's a subdivision or a commercial site.
I think we all know what the initial approval is. The question is there follow-up to that after the subdivision is established? Are we supposed to be checking on them annually, monthly? Are we supposed to be inspecting those at all? And if not us, who? And
Right.
if there is something specifically found as an issue, who's supposed to oversee the repairs? Do they have to have certain qualifications? Those are the things that are exceedingly gray areas for us.
Okay, let me just read, because
That's
your
what I'm asking.
questions were very thorough. So I'll just read the question, and it came from different sources, and I'll read the answer that I typed up in the
Sure.
email. Let's see, the first question, the question that came up that precipitated some of this was, are requiring an annual inspection of retention ponds, and whether or not we wanted to continue requiring this. Okay, the answer is annual inspections are required by the operation and maintenance agreement that is executed between the developer and the village. And that's what I just handed out. So before we sign off on final plan approval, that document is signed by the developer and village. Okay. The agreement is filed at the courthouse with the final plat or before a CO is issued in the case of a business. That attached, the form there was updated in 2016 and it was reviewed by the village attorney in 2016. Do you remember that?
I have a paper.
So it was just tweaked. We were talking about it and we had George make sure that we were doing it okay, so he did. So and that's what you have before you there. So that agreement is filed with the final plat. So requirements for inspection. How often are they required and who oversees them? They are required annually, and the HOA or the commercial property manager is responsible for hiring someone to do the inspections. The qualified person is a registered professional engineer or a registered landscape architect in North Carolina. They report to the HOA or the property manager. The town's responsibility for these inspections are, when Bill was here, we set up a system where the village sends a reminder July or August to everyone that we have on record that has an agreement on file and the pond has been put into service, which means the engineer has certified it, submitted as-built, and it's officially online. So I think there's about 5 or 6 of those, and Cheryl and Bill, and we did it this year too, sent out a letter and said, please send your inspection reports by October. And we decided it would be easier to do once a year than try to do an anniversary date for each one. So end of October is about when we expect those to come in. So
Do you know roughly how many we have? I mean, is it 5 or is it 15?
We have less than 10, I think.
About 6 or 8.
yeah. And
About hit 2 more. Doesn't the bridge have problems?
No, you're talking about new development.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And then-
We have it in place.
It'll keep.
yeah, like fire station has done it for several years, Aston, and there's one more.
McKinley Forest?
McKinley has done 1 year. So, and they're all in, we have a spreadsheet where we keep up with them.
If we have a subdivision that was already in place when we adopted in 1998, when we became the village of Wesley Chapel, they grandfathered in and don't have to do that, and it only applies to new subdivisions.
Correct.
Okay, so existing subdivisions self-govern or self-supervise.
Right, yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
it's
it's-
the same thing with other states, because they were built on county guidelines, and we just,
Well, that was gonna be my follow-up question, is if we bring somebody in, like the subdivision we're talking about, do we have to add them to the list?
That was one of the questions that came in too, is like, if they were developed under the county's ordinance and it is a retention pond, then I think it would be reasonable to have them sign an agreement like you do with all the other developments, since it's, I guess you can ask them to do what you want, right, if you annex them. And it seems like it would just be up to snuff, and they're gonna take care of it and ensure that they'll do that. if they're annexed.
For a standard retention pond, let's say like the one right outside the window here,
I want to ask one thought on that
Yeah, that might be a
particular,
legal
George.
question.
Given if they're annexing in, we would need to ask at the point of the annexation to be a part of the parcel. Once they've annexed, I don't know, could we actually go back and we can ask them to sign it, of course, but I mean,
But the
We
thing
could
is, the
force
county
it.
doesn't require it.
Well, that's
So
what I
They don't
mean.
require a stormwater pond, so there are no agreements.
well, I understand that. My point is that if we want to ask them to do this, because
But they
one of the
don't have
big
a
issues we
facility.
get calls on,
They don't even have a facility. They don't have any.
well, they may not have a stormwater pond. If they have a stormwater pond, because I have seen one or two in the county that do have a pond, not an agreement. So the question is, we can ask if they want to annex, because we're concerned about stormwater and those kind of things, but once they've annexed, we can't necessarily go back and say, fill this out.
I mean, you could absolutely do it on the front end. After the fact, could you force them to do it by amending your ordinance in such a way that governs all properties subject to or within the village limits? You might be able to do that.
Okay, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
well, my follow-up question was gonna be, standard size retention pond, what are we talking numbers-wise to have that inspected by an engineer? Is it a $30, $40, or $300 or $400, or $4,000 or $5,000?
There's not that much. What we've seen for the couple that we've kind of inquired about $1,200 to $1,500
Annually?
annually. And that's for the professional to go to the site, do the inspection, write the report with pictures, submit it, and then if there's any follow-up needed, like some repairs need to be made, going back out to the site. So about $1,500.
Okay.
So,
I just know with some of the larger subdivisions, that probably wouldn't be an issue for their HOA, but like Wesley Ponds, I think is only 8 houses. And, you know, that's a
Yeah.
lot on an annual basis.
Right, that's just
divided
like, that's
by-
per pond, yeah, so if you
Right.
had 3 ponds, then you might get a little discount because it's already out there, but,
But they already are on the list. They have to do an inspection.
Wesley
Okay.
Pond has been doing theirs. And to kind of follow up on something we said earlier, like the village monitors and we receive the reports, 9 times out of 10, the engineer signs off on it. There might be some maintenance issues like the grass is not growing great or riprap needs some improvement. But occasionally, we might get one that's not really great. An example was McDonald's a couple of years ago. Bill worked tirelessly with that property owner, and it was just a matter of, they didn't quite understand exactly what needed to be done, but the report came back, it was just in terrible shape. So it took a couple of months, but he worked with them and did what he needed to do and to help that property manager. And now I think McDonald's looks as good as any in the town, but it took a while. And so that's an example of needing to follow up on a report that comes in that is not up to par. But most of them are okay. They come in, the engineer signs off on it. If a problem is found, whoever sees the repairs, the HOA or the property manager would be responsible for that. The company, do they have to have specific certifications? That's not specified in the agreement with the village, but the repairs must satisfy the inspector who did the report, because he'll have to come back out and sign off that he's satisfied with the repairs. That's right. Let's see, what changes would be recommended to the ordinance? I think none at this time. We did do some tweaks in 2017, January 2017, and that was things like, Amanda was on the planning board then. We raised the treatment threshold slightly from 0 to 2,500 square feet, just to allow for some really small developments like the farmer's market and the something at the school. It was like I forget what it was called, but a very small impervious area, didn't have to provide detention. We added a design storm. We added a few other things. So I think it's only been 2 years, you're still kind of seeing new developments that come in under the new ordinance. But I think you guys have a good ordinance. The 25-year detention is good. That reminds me of something else I wanted to do, you guys. And, this is a comparison of how your ordinance stacks up with others in Union County and also in Mecklenburg County. So up at the top, Wesley Chapel, your treatment threshold, or the point at which a development has to provide a stormwater management plan, is 2,500 square feet. You have a volume control design element there. Detaining, so it should be the 2, the 10, and the 25-year must be detained to pre-development rates and safely pass the 50 and 100. And then you can compare to your neighbors, Indian Trail. Waxhaw, I checked them actually this afternoon, and they had the 10-year was their maximum storm, which it was higher a few years ago, so they actually went down. Weddington detains to the 100, and in Mecklenburg County, they're pretty consistent with the 10-year and the 25-year, those towns.
Is it safe to say that we've had a few events that recently met the 100-year requirement?
Well, actually, it didn't get to the 100-year.
Really?
Yeah.
The hurricane, that wasn't a 100-year event? Every road that we got was.
No. And this data is rainfall data, so this is not runoff data. There's some difference. It depends on your watershed and your soils and a lot of other things, but this is just rainfall data that's pulled from NOAA, and that is a website. That was another change we made to your ordinance a couple of years ago, is that a designer pulls rainfall data from the NOAA is the Oceanic Atmospheric Association. Like that. Anyway, these are rainfall depths. So on September 15th, there was 2.57 inches over a 24-hour period. On September 16th, there was 5.11 inches measured over a 24-hour period. And this was in Mineral Springs. There's not many rain gauges in Union County with USGS. There's like 2. And Mecklenburg County has dozens, so maybe you guys could consider get your own rain gauge one day and get your own rain data. But this was Mineral Springs. And if you go to the chart on the second page, I've highlighted in yellow that on the 16th, September 16th, there was 5.11 inches over a 24-hour period. And if you, on your left, look for the 24-hour storm, just the duration, then move to your right until you get under the 10, which is highlighted at the top. That 5.11 inches falls just shy of 5.32, which is a 10-year storm for the 24-hour period.
And that wasn't a record, that was not a 100-year event?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
If you drop down to the other measurement, which was, if you add the 2 days together, it's 7.68 inches
No.
over 2 days, and then drop down and follow the purple stripe, that was roughly a 25-year storm over 2 days.
The concerns I heard most often for people on that day was they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't drive in any direction and get to, in or out of Wesley Chapel. And they're more concerned with if there was somebody had a heart attack or somebody had something where somebody had to come in and get them, that they were landlocked or they were waterlocked. And they're looking to us to, what do you do to fix that? I'm like, I don't know what we can do to fix that specifically.
Right. And I know some of the flooding issues have to do with culverts in low spots that aren't sized for storms. They might be sized for a 10-year storm. Just thinking out loud, some of these roads are still country roads, and DOT designed them probably for a 10 or 25-year storm and new development. And I know there's a development nearby where they're actually 2 FEMA floodplains come together just downstream, and you can actually see on a map how they would be
Trapped.
isolated. Yeah. during a storm like that.
So we don't control what happens once it leaves the property and it goes into the stream. That's not under our control. Or if it goes underneath the road, again, that's not under our control. It's up to the Department of Transportation. If the culvert isn't big enough under the road or whatever causes the backup.
Right. You guys are making efforts to control new development, which is, you're taking down trees and you're putting up driveways and houses. So you're trying to compensate for the runoff that's created by that new development. And I think it sounds like maybe the ponds performed okay. I haven't heard of any ponds that did strange things during the storms. They didn't ever top or wash out. So it would seem that they performed like they should have during the 2 days where there was a 24-year storm. So that would be, or if we could ask the HOAs how the ponds did, if it's an observation.
Do you work at all with the DOT?
Some in a reviewing capacity, like I know the people there in the office that does reviews for stormwater and the streets.
We had a record number of roads closed in Union County on those 2 days, well, 1 day specifically, and residents don't want to hear us as a Village of Wesley Chapel Council say, well, we're meeting all of our requirements, but the roads are still closed. And it sounds like we need to work a little bit closer with the DOT.
Yeah, and I could help with that if you'd like me to, if you want
I just
to
don't
initiate
want,
a conversation or.
I don't want angry residents pointing their fingers at us saying, what did you guys do? I'm like, well, we didn't do anything. But if we're not designing it to incorporate not only the property, but the stream down the road, across the road, down the waterway, we need to work with whoever we need to work with to fix that. So, God forbid somebody their house was burned down or someone had a heart attack and couldn't get an ambulance in. They always shoot politicians first.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what that would entail, like reaching out to DOT and explaining the issue, like our residents are flooding out. Because if you replace one pipe, then the water's just going to move on downstream. So it needs a big picture to it, because at some point you want it to get down to a nice big floodplain where you can just let it loose. And that would take some planning.
I didn't hear about any properties specifically flooding, but if a cornfield floods, no big deal. If someone's house floods out, or there's property damage, that's a different deal.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
thank you.
Yep. Okay. And I think that's all I brought. And I think that was most of the questions that I got.
Okay. Anything else? No? So again,
One question, if we got a neighborhood that's signed the consent form and they don't do the inspection, what teeth do we have to go after them? Just keep sending them letters saying we want your report?
There is teeth in the agreement.
That we'll do it and send you a bill?
That's in there.
Okay.
Yeah. In the case of McDonald's, it didn't get to the point of a notice of violation, like a nasty letter. Bill just worked with them and they were cooperating. But if you did get someone who just wouldn't do it, wouldn't send a report, wouldn't fix it, you can send them a notice, and the agreement says within 10 days they have to do something, or you can take legal action. Then we would call George for him to assist with how to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
again, thank you for making a trip down, Marty. I mean, the crazy weather, but
Yeah, is there anything I can do as far as reaching out to DOT to start a conversation, or do you want to?
well, I think what we probably need to do at some point, and it's a bigger, back to your point, I've had meetings with property owners over, as I know Mike has, I think other people have as well. And like the subdivision, I can't remember its name, just built north of Lindenwood on Waxahachie Trail Road. When that,
That's the chase.
Wesley Chase, thank you. When that was built, there was an increasing amount of runoff that was going into, family that lived off of Underwood Road. A couple of trees died because the area stayed so wet. I met with DOT down there several times, and their statement was, well, it's a, I don't remember the number, so please excuse me, but either a 24 or 32-inch culvert there, and that's per their standards, and they're not going to change it. And
I remember that one.
yeah, and so it typically is the answer we get all the time, but because you change one, you allow the flood to go down further, we're change the next one. You know, because I think that happened to lead into Quintessa's pond. And so, you know, that's what we're dealing with, and we need like a holistic picture of the whole thing. Where does this runoff go? And I don't know that anybody has any, FEMA, I guess, has the flood maps, so that would show floodplains. I would imagine we could look at roadways where it goes under and kind of begin. That's a long time thing. So, and then you've got to get DOT to do something about it.
But you're qualifying that this event in September wasn't even a 100-year flood. This was a 50?
Nope.
The 25 over 2 days, and this rainfall,
Yeah.
the burn, so qualify that, but yeah.
So potentially it could get worse than what we saw in September. I hate that. People thought, oh, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I'm like, no,
No,
sadly, no.
yeah, it does seem, you know, weird than that.
No. Thank you.
Thank you again, appreciate it. Item number 7 on the agenda is a public hearing on text amendment for construction and sales trailers and possible decision on ordinance 2018-11 to adopt text amendment regarding temporary trailers. So, first of all, do we have anybody, was anybody signed up at the time? Okay. Well, I open the public hearing, and do I need to have that open, George? I'm trying to remember, we haven't done one of these in a bit. Just for the planning board members to talk? Not the planning board, the planning and zoning administrators? Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, this is long term. I actually didn't work on it, but initially, what you have before you is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, and it was done to, the ordinance was sort of contradictory and seemed to be overly burdened about these, you know, sales trailers, construction trailers, field offices. They're really all one and the same thing. And a lot of these subdivisions have them. Some of them don't, but you know, they'll just put the model homes in. But they're considered temporary uses, and they were also considered as conditional uses that required the village council to approve each of them. And it really came to head, I think, with the construction trailer at Courtyards. So it seemed to be really inconsistent, so it went to the planning board and they sort of said, well, you know, they're all the same, let's just make them all the same. We issue a temporary permit for 1 year, let the zoning administrator do it and be done with it, and that's kind of where that is. So what you have before you is a proposed ordinance where it makes some definition changes because in the ordinance there was just nothing about office trailers, sales trailers, construction trailers. They just had some trailers but not everything. And the big thing was we deleted them out of the conditional uses and left them in there. You know, they're just with the supplemental restrictions, and it simply says manufactured homes, construction trailers, sales trailer, and temporary buildings not for residential purposes when used by a contractor for a field office and storage during the building of a structure on the same site or subdivision are permitted. The permit shall be issued for 1 year. It was only for 6 months. For 1 year and may be renewed by the zoning administrator provided that the construction had proceeded in a diligent manner.
Any particular questions for, I guess we can do that in a second. Given we have no other comments, no other,
I have one question. Are you familiar with the storage trailers behind the pet store?
The pet store over here,
Right over here.
or over here, where,
wait,
Yeah, Pets R Us.
oh, Pet,
that's smart.
That's
oh,
smart.
PetSmart,
That's
yes.
smart.
Uh,
There's 3 40-foot shipping containers back there.
I have seen them, but I wouldn't, are they, I guess they are probably storage trailers, but they're not really construction trailers. Are they storing them, using them like warehousing?
One has a lock on it and has stuff in it, the other two are empty. Does this fall underneath that stipulation?
No, because those are probably storage trailers. You know, they're on site, but they're storage trailers. This was to address construction trailers, like, you know, they'll have the project manager sits in them with the plans so people can have them met. Or they sometimes are used as sales trailers, but those are probably storage trailers. I guess we can look into them to see.
But you said
Exactly.
storage as you were reading down the qualification list. Was one of the,
Let's see. It says manufactured home, construction trailer, sales trailer, and temporary buildings not for residential purposes when used by a contractor for field office or storage during the building of a structure. So it would have to be something related to the building of it.
just
It
a,
could be,
Contractor.
it could be a contractor, but are they having work
It's
done in the
no,
building?
they're not. That's why I was just wondering why there's 3 40-foot shipping containers sitting in the middle of the
Yeah,
field.
that doesn't,
I don't think that's
Doesn't
not
cover
covered by this.
right.
Okay. Just push it up to the top. There you go. Sorry.
Okay. And we had no one sign up. I'm just trying to see, did you have the, no, we're gonna do the decision at the same time, okay. So I closed the public hearing on the text amendment. And this was recommended by the planning board as well.
Yes, sir.
So, I guess we did the decision here. I thought we usually put the decisions later on, Cheryl, we did this time.
When it's something else simple.
Yeah, okay. So, if we don't have any other questions, do I have a motion to approve the, 2018-11 ordinance change, with the text amendment, change, I should say.
Did you close the public hearing?
Yes.
So motion.
I just have one question, if it's still permissible at this point.
Yeah, well, can I have a second first? Okay, now we have a question. We have a motion, second, and discussion, that's the way it works.
I was just curious why we expanded it from 6 months to a year, but 6 months and renewable, we run into pressure from developers that they were needing more than 6 months. So then they probably want to get out of the sales trailers as fast as they can into a model home.
Full development, I think, probably takes more than 6 months.
You know.
Yeah.
Well,
Slating to finish at least to the
I
line.
mean, that's a lot of concern, if they have a year, that they can have a sales trailer sitting out there for a year, as opposed to, I don't have any issues one way or another, but it's just,
a construction trailer might be there longer. I mean, my dad was in the construction business and he worked out of construction for 2 years, I mean, in some
Yeah.
cases, so I think a year makes sense, that's why I think. Council? All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Thank you, Shelley.
So,
Finance officers report. Cheryl?
Okay. The October reports are here. We're starting to see property tax come in. And We have our new contractors in place for the pond and the landscaping, so we're paying them. We did make you see the Christmas lights are up outside, we started that. We paid planning board. We did pay for the second quarter for the deputy. And we did make a payment on the codification, which is on your agenda later in the meeting. We had expenses for the fall festival at the park. And we also paid for the irrigation system at the park. That was a pretty good sized item. The other thing that I have for you tonight, when you approved hiring the planning and zoning person, I did the budget amendment for the salary and moving it from in focus. But last month we did approve a budget amendment for the clerk raise, and we didn't do that, so I'm asking you to approve moving the money to fund that, to move $1,265 from the allowance for salary adjustments and $100 to payroll tax and $100 to retirement. So I need a motion on that.
So motion.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. Yeah, we talked about it, I guess we didn't do the motion, thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah, we didn't
I know
have
we
the
talked
following.
about it, because
And you do notice that we are continue to stay in the red. And I just sort of point that out so that you realize we're about 200,000 in the red at that point of the year, which is about a quarter of the budget.
right, and that may come into bearing, if I could, that may come into bearing, because we've talked over the years, I think, the state requires us to maintain a minimum of
8%, which is ridiculously
8%.
low.
Right, no, we always have done 20,
We require 25.
25, I thought it was 25, but we may want to look at that again next year, just to be a little on the safe side. Again, this is not an unusual situation. It is just every year your revenues come in after you've already had months of expenses. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, go ahead, Mike.
My question was related to the end of the fiscal year that ended June 30th. Is that statement public yet?
No, she should have submitted it to the state, but the state has to review it before they let her release it out. But I gave you those numbers last month. We did have a net loss for the year because we had the one big expense for the traffic, the roundabout.
It's not even built yet.
Pardon?
It's the one that's not built yet, right?
They have the money, not us, yeah. But,
It's a requirement.
Good.
You want it, you pay for it.
No question. I guess
I
the
mean,
question
hopefully
was,
we get it. We will get it. I shouldn't say hopefully. We will, hopefully sooner rather than later is what I meant.
well, if we don't get it, we want the money back. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that
No,
would-
my only question was, when will the financial statements for the fiscal year be available?
hopefully next month, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for Cheryl?
What did we end up on the irrigation with that,
Doing the irrigation?
for the park when we finished that up?
How much?
Yeah.
They're 39.5.
Yeah.
And we budgeted 40.
And it's all in operation, right?
And that price did include winterization this fall, and then in the spring, they're going to open it back up for us. After that, we have to pay for the winterization and the turning it back on in the spring. John and I will probably speak about that.
It's relatively minor amount, but we'll talk about that.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for Cheryl? Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, planning board report. I know John couldn't make it tonight. He actually asked me if he's got family in, so, the only thing they really worked on was, the only thing, it was a long meeting, but what they worked on was the solar power generating facility. So, ordinance, and spent quite a bit of time. We had most of us, I think all of us were there, listening to the experts that Deb had contacted from Deb Bledsoe, from the state, and so they were very informative. So I think that was a positive move. So, as Deb's here, I don't know if she could answer any questions, but I'll ask council if they have any, or Shelley could answer as well. But I think we were all there. So, no? Okay. Youth council, I don't think anybody's here, but are you gonna speak to that at all?
Yeah, they met, hopefully Cheryl got the email, they weren't able to print they've approved all the minutes to backlog that, so
I didn't get any.
we'll get that taken care of. One of the projects they were looking at is connecting with John to finish the rock wall that they'd been working on. So we'll get that done, find some other projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, but you should also mention that they show up at Fall Bash and.
Yeah, they did the fall bash piece with the scavenger hunt. Had fun with the kids. And one of the things that's coming up on the horizon to talk about is the YLA, Youth Leadership piece out of Raleigh. And we set aside some of the dollars just to see if anybody wanted to do that this year.
They said they want to or not, or they don't know yet, or haven't come up yet?
Hadn't come up.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for Paul? Okay. Next item on the agenda, item 11, is the Park and Rec Committee report. John? Thank you for coming. Welcome.
So we last met on October 16th, so some of this is a bit old news, but things have happened since then, so I'll give you updates on those as well. We had some final discussions about the Fall Bash, specifically the need for adult volunteers. We had a great showing of teen volunteers, but there is a noted lack of adult volunteers, and the look for people have asked, can we perhaps somehow get more adults involved when we have an event, because they just basically need more adult volunteers. We had somewhere between 11 and 1,200 people show up for the event, which was great attendance, and I think it was well received by everybody. So we're on to planning the next one now. We discussed the progress with the irrigation system, the electrical upgrades. As somebody just mentioned, the irrigation system is now up and running. Mike and I and Brad were there for the commissioning and had some training on how to operate it. And as Mike mentioned, the first year includes the servicing of the system. In future years, we'll probably have to budget the small amount necessary for them to do that service for us. We talked about the idea of, in the fall, having some volunteer days, as we used to in the past. There's several things we can fix with volunteers without spending taxpayer money: cleaning up some of the storm stuff, some minor repairs, modifying swales so we prevent the irrigation system from being washed out in a big storm. So there's a few minor projects we want to get done, and we're thinking we'll organise a volunteer day to do that. Beth has also worked on re-establishing a means of recording who volunteers so that we can reach out to those past volunteers and see if we can get them back again. And also a means of, again, logging the volunteer hours, because for some grant programs, the hours donated, the hours labour donated can count as payment in lieu for some matching grants. So we've already set that up. As you guys know, you've approved the bandshell update. Mike and the bandshell construction. Mike and I met with the contractor and Troy, the architect, for the pre-construction meeting. Things have already been happening. All the shop drawings have been reviewed and by the engineer, submitted to Troy. That's all ongoing. They're probably looking at starting digging holes in about the next 2 weeks, depending on the weather, and they're pretty confident they can complete the project within the 90-day allotted time. We talked about the next phase in development of the facility to host music events, and that will be a sound system. We've already established a spec. We've suggested that we need or council needs to act to approve to go out to bid so that we can get the bids in, review the bids, make a recommendation, approve it, and then get it delivered before the first big event, which I'll talk about in a minute, where we need the sound system. We had a discussion about the DOT funds, and if you think logically about it, you know, PARDEF had funded an easement in the past, and now what's happening is we're basically moving the easement, but now they're taking away the compensation we're receiving for that easement. So Mike had suggested perhaps we could fight against that. We met with PARDEF when Mike and I attended a conference up in Winston-Salem. Our PARDEF rep was pretty strong on, that's the rules, you've been told what's going to happen, and it ain't up for negotiation. The Parks and Rec Committee suggested maybe George could take a look at it and see if there's any scope for any negotiation. That was our thought at the time of the Parks and Rec meeting, but after the discussion we had with the PARDEF rep, I'm not so confident that we're going to make any headway there. Although we don't have a problem right now with membership on the committee, we have in the past, and one of the committee members, Pam King, have reviewed what other towns around us do with regard to membership of committees, advisory boards, etc. related to parks. And we all agreed that it really didn't make sense just to limit membership of the committee, since we have no spending authority whatsoever, to limit the committee to only Wesley Chapel residents. And we're asking you guys, it's on your agenda later, to consider opening up membership on the committee to residents of neighbouring communities if they have skills or a passion that could be useful to the committee should we need additional members. We discussed the PARDEF grant application. Some of the feedback we got from the public information sessions was that we need a playground in the park. So we were thinking that a possible source of funding for that would be a PARDEF grant. And the thought was we do a PARDEF grant application for a playground sooner rather than later, like in the 2019 deadline, and then maybe in 2020, should survey data suggest a keen interest in the community centre in the park as it has in the past, that we consider a grant for that in the future. When we met with the PARDEF people, they said, don't send in an application that has only one amenity. They said you'll only get 5 of the possible 15 points. They said you need to submit an application with 3 amenities. So I suggested we didn't have matching funds for anything big, and said cornhole, something small that gets you the maximum 15 points should be added to the application. So we're going to rethink the whole PARDEF grant application thing. The other thing they said is, you know, you might want to apply for the community centre now and the playground. I said, well, we don't have the matching funds. They said, you don't need to have the matching funds. Council just has to have a capital improvement plan showing where those matching funds are going to come from down the road. So they said, maybe you want to consider doing playground and community centre. The one disturbing thing I heard from the PARDEF guy was regarding the refund of the monies for the DOT situation. we repeated back to them that, hey, we've been told it's going to have no impact whatsoever on our future applications. And he said something like, well, yeah, that's the politically correct answer. He said, but you're going to be handing money back, and then in a second breath asking for more money. It might not look so good. We're making progress on the signs. Beth and Cheryl are working on ordering the signs you've approved. I found a local print shop to do the rule sign. We had NC Wildlife review the stocking. I'd reported earlier that we needed some bigger fish, so they were able to find a 75-inch bluegill, which they put in the pond in August, and they gave us our regular catfish stocking. And next time they do the catfish stocking, they were again going to look at giving us some more big bluegills to put in the pond. To help control the weeds, we had to get a permit. There's no cost for it, so we've applied for a permit to put grass carp in there to help control the weeds. And once we get that permit, I'll be coming to council and asking for some money to buy a few grass carp. We talked about 2019 events in the park, and what we thought we would do to get the biggest bang for our buck is kind of have a beta test on the music festival and combine it with Pig in the Park, so we're not duplicating an expense for deputies to cross the road and stuff for a completely separate event. That will allow us to get some experience with the logistics of bringing bands in and out. There would not be alcohol at this event. We'd consider doing that further down the road next year, but we'd just like to beta test the whole concept of a music festival without alcohol at the time we do Pig in the Park. So we're discussing that with the Wesley Chapel Friend of the Parks and Recreation.
And just as an aside, that is normally their lowest attending event, if you will, of the three that they currently have. But they run actually. So.
Right.
John, can you speak all about the repairs to the fishing pier?
Yes. So, North Carolina Wildlife tried to send a guy out to look at our pier for possible repairs. Last week he was unable to make it, so there's still a hope we may get some free repairs to the pier, but he hasn't actually been yet. It seems that should we get the free repairs, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And I have approached one contractor with a view just going out to take a look and tell me what it might cost should that not occur. But the first approach is going to be keep bugging NC Wildlife to repair it for us at no cost. And until that fails, I really don't want to come to you guys and ask for money to fix it.
And George, we can do that, right? We just ask somebody to give us an idea what they think it would cost. Yes. Okay. I mean, it's not a formal anything.
You basically just to look at it and give me a scope of work.
Right. I thought it was, but
Yeah.
let me just ask the question.
Right. And then if it becomes an amount where we have to bid it, then we'll write a form
Right.
spec and go through the normal. So we finished putting the picnic tables together, and next meeting we'll be laying out a detailed action plan for bringing us to a part of application at the deadline in 2019 for at least the playground. But as I said, part of suggested we consider a couple of the small amenities to get the maximum number of points. And to get the maximum points, we're going to have to have a park-specific survey, which I know is on your agenda later today. And then the last thing we talked about was the organised sports use of the park, commercial entities using the park for organised sports events. We suggested some action that the village write, reminding the business that the park isn't, prohibits organised sporting events, and that we also have a procedure should they wish to rent the park for an event there's a procedure and policy in place for them to do that. So we're not saying you can't do that, we're saying you need to follow the rules.
Okay.
Is it? Any questions?
Anything else for John?
Are you familiar with Union Tower, that I think they have some community grant dollars? I was speaking with Jake Thomas, who's their community affairs guy on the leadership union program. And he said, yeah, there's some program dollars they have available, so I'd like to put you in touch with them about the band show, and certainly there's some dollars needed for the electrification, amplification part, but it's worth a conversation to see. Yeah, but they're just right now, Rocky River.
No, anybody who's got grant money available, I'd love to talk.
I'll get you his email and discuss the scope of these projects.
Awesome, thanks.
Sounds good, thanks. Anybody else? Okay, thanks, John. Next item on the agenda, item 12, is the Communications Committee report. Deb?
Good evening. The committee has approved the amendment to our charter and now presents it to you in its updated final form. The amendment listed under your agenda item memo comes in light of a suggestion made by council that when we initially approved the charter, that we sort of flesh out the introduction a little bit and give more information about what we will do. So we did that, and I'm requesting that you make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Deb, and your committee and George for taking a look at it. Thanks.
The committee has approved the final edits to the Facebook policy as made by our village council, and did a very good job of that, I must say. And it outlines what is acceptable and not acceptable on the page, and this policy will remain at the top of the Facebook page so people can see it first thing. It's going to be pinned there, so it will not move down as we add new things to it. And we request that we motion to approve this policy.
So motion.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve the Facebook policy. Do we have a second?
Can we enforce that it's adhered to?
I'm sorry?
How can we enforce that it's adhered to?
I have a big stick.
Well, picture of George right beside.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. All those in favor? Thank you, appreciate it.
As for who will post on the Facebook page, it's been decided that the committee chair, which is me, the co-chair, administrative assistant, and town clerk will be the only individuals to post and monitor the village page. I ask that you motion to approve.
So motion.
Okay, a motion and a second, thank you. I'm just gonna add thank you, Cheryl, for working with Deb to get those last couple pieces tweaked.
She's been awesome.
Any other discussion?
I'm not a social media guru, but will you be able to join and like the page?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So applications or admission to the page, is it a private group?
No, it will be up to the public. It's a
Okay.
government page. I mean, it's the town's page, so it's open. Okay.
Well, we're going.
And the
Sorry.
administrators, the people who are authorized as administrators can take down the questionable
Oh, yes.
or block,
Yeah.
hide, whatever. the
We
correct term
will
is.
hide it so that the person who posted it will still be able to see it, but no one else will. And that means we can keep it in case we need to for record purposes.
Awesome.
Okay, got a motion and a second, all those in favor? Okay,
The type of post that has been listed on your memo, it includes information about town sanctioned events, traffic situations, safety problems, messages the village will hope to pass out to citizens. As I specified, there will be no sales promotions, no political posts, or posts that would be a copyright infringement. And we ask that, make a motion to approve.
So motion.
okay, do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor? Thank you.
So we would respectfully request village Facebook page go live immediately. Once the face page is approved, I'll be posting photos from the Fall Bash that I took when I was out there and information about our new seal. But I want the mayor's greeting to remain a few more days before I put new stuff on. I want his, so that people can see his smiling face and his welcome to the Facebook page. So, because as soon as I post fall bash pictures or whatever, it's going to push that down. So I want to wait, let that stay up there for a little while. So we just ask that you guys allow us to make the page live, and we will do that like 5 minutes.
Appreciate all the work that you've done. Do we need to make a special motion to make that live at this point, or we approved everything around it?
Already done all that today.
Yay!
Thank you. Committee, please.
Please have the safety committee work with John on Parks and Rec committee too, so they can advertise.
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. The committee's next meeting is January 24th. We're not going to have one in December. We will have one on November 29th and then January 24th, excuse me. So this concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any other questions?
It's about time.
November 29th.
November 29th, yes, sir, is our next meeting, and then after that is January 24th.
Wouldn't have happened without you.
Are we invited on a rotational basis?
You're invited to come anytime.
So one of your next goals is Twitter?
Yes, we want to do a Twitter page, a Twitter account, and Instagram also. That's really, really popular. I do not know anything about Instagram, but I'm going to learn.
Don't look at me. I try and stay away from
Yeah, but we've written a social media policy that's all-encompassing, and once that's approved, George is going to be really happy to hear that we're going to be giving that to him too. So.
anything else.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Be good to get that going.
I'm sure, George, you're seeing a lot of stuff now of the, can I say evolution in government? So,
Sure you can.
Evolution of the pushing of the envelope with social media and what's permissible, what's not, in a municipality or governmental page.
Yeah, which is all developing. It's interesting too how it all plays into what, public records and information that's submitted to a governmental organization and how that becomes a public record. And so I'm sure there'll be plenty of lawsuits over stuff over the next number of years as people in courts try to figure out what it all means.
Well, currently we have our binder of rules and regulations, and that has to be codified, that we're just in the process of completing now. Do we need to do something in addition to codifying our ordinances, something that specifically is for online, social media type?
So that's not an ordinance, that's just a policy, and the code of ordinances doesn't include your various policies, like your personnel policies or Facebook policy or whatever. So you don't have any obligation to incorporate that. I mean, you're doing the right things, which is having a written policy about it, but you don't have to do anything more than that.
Beyond that.
Okay.
One other thing, though, I know you mentioned about them working with Park and Rec. I think, and George, I haven't really gone over this with you, but I think probably the best thing is for them to make a copy to the clerk, so we have it as a record copy at Town Hall, and then their copies was going to be like a reference copy.
That would make sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Great.
You know, we're Deb to come to one of the youth council meetings and kind of from that youth perspective, kind of get some of that, obviously, trained and tempered.
And that new technology energy.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else? Okay. Item 13, I think Mike, you're up on this one. Consider having a legal review of estimates of park right-of-way funds regarding return of those funds to park.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the dollars and cents of that. I think we're all in agreement that the land we have to give up specifically for the DOT, that funds have to go back to PARDF. The other half of that is the improvement funds, which is specifically $19,500. we're gonna have to use that money to rebuild trails, maybe rebuild part of the dog park. These are for
The
the
trees, the fence.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, the fence, the trees, the trails. So that is pretty much cleared up. It's the two easements, the temporary construction easement and the permanent easement. And again, John alluded to this, we're taking an easement that already exists, we're keeping that easement, we're just moving it over. And the comparison I would use is, if you wake up in the morning and someone was digging up a water main break in your front yard, you can't run out there and say, no, no, stop doing that, that's my yard. Because there is an easement out there for the water mains and the electric lines and the phone lines and cable. And there's that easement that they can pretty much do whatever they want in that property. You gave them ease to come onto your property, but you still own it. It's the way I understand easement to work. So the question is, if we already have an easement at the park that's, I don't know, 15 feet, for example, when the road expands and we give up that 50 feet of property, we should give them the right-of-way acquired at $54,175. The question is the $18,500 and the roughly $4,000 for the temporary construction easement, that's the funds that are in question here. And if it was $200 or $300, I wouldn't be concerned about this, but that's a good chunk of change. So.
And just for, I don't think it got out because it just came out Friday. I got a letter from the part of coordinator that said they agreed with my argument about the 19,100, if I remember right, which is the improvement funds, that should not be part of the remittance going back to part of. So we've cleared that up. So it's those remaining funds that Mike is questioning. I have one other thought. I usually wait for everybody else to talk, but if you don't mind, in this case, I want to throw out there. If you are going, what?
22,500 is the questionable.
I understand, but if you're going out there to ask them for additional funds, it seems like it's not a good idea to, especially since the language is in there already that says easements are part of it. If you have to give up an easement, even if though it's an existing easement and it's a new easement and whatever, it's just being moved. By fighting that, you might bias a future grant. And that would be my concern at this point. Is that worth, I know it's a sizable chunk of change, I'm not disagreeing with you, but as a comparison to the grant we'd be asking for, it's relatively minor. So that's just my thought, but now I'll be quiet.
We also have an easement down Western Vegas Road on the other side of the park. Do we say, hey, by the way, you want more money for that? It seems kind of silly.
Thoughts, anybody? Paul?
I just feel like
Amanda?
the whole process was held up a lot for a little bit, if that's the right way to put it, for the easement of that 84 corridor that we've really been over backwards to thread that needle through that small space. Hey, I've been part of negotiations, and there's short-term view and long-term view, and certainly there's more projects that we have coming along, and we're one municipality out of 550 in the state, so might not like it, got to figure out a way to get along and, just kind of play by the rules a little bit. I think if we agitate the whole system, it becomes more complicated.
So, go ahead.
Does it hurt to have George look at it? Let me see.
It doesn't hurt anything, I don't think it's that.
That was the thought. The suggestion was, can George look at what's written at the state and pilot and then just say, look guys, forget it? Or, hey, you know what, your logical argument that you just moved in that easement is a sound one, and that there could be a legal argument made that, hey, we really deserve that.
Keep in mind, when I put this on the agenda 2 weeks ago, we've had meetings subsequent to that, we've had new information subsequent to that, so.
But I'm fine if that's what council wants to do. I mean, I have no problem with George looking at it, and I think we still needs to come back to us to kind of make a decision. And we haven't been sent the funds yet, so there's nothing like a huge rush to make this decision. But if you're gonna have them look at it in the interim, there is no harm, no foul.
and it always seems to always come down to money. George, what's it gonna cost us to have you look at this and review it versus, if it's gonna cost us $20,000.
Well, I promise you it won't be that much money. This sounds like a couple hours worth of work to review.
How long is that?
Review the part of regulations, look at the documents from the acquisition, and
Okay.
give you guys at least here's my initial thought.
Is it worth, going after or not? So, I'm not asking for an answer for that, I'm just, that will be the question we want answered.
Right.
Well, do we want George to look at it, and if so, I want a motion on that, just because we're gonna be spending money.
The initial, what came out of the Parks and Rec Committee was to have George review the information,
So
so
I understand, but we are the,
so I will make the motion to have George review the information and come back with a recommendation to council.
okay, do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor? Good deal. As I said, I have no problem looking at it, it doesn't hurt. Okay. Item 14, discuss allowing non-residents to be members of the Park and Rec Committee.
That's an item for me as well. A year or two ago, we had an issue where we had someone who comes from Park on almost a daily basis. And they're a master gardener, and they said, hey, we'd like to be more involved in the park, considering they come here every day. They live in Weddington, and they tried to apply for a position on the Parks and Rec Committee. They tried to be involved in a park that they're at on a daily basis, and their answer that they got back from us was, well, you're not a resident, no. And the issue is the Parks and Rec Committee cannot spend money. They're only doing volunteer work, they're only making recommendation to council. So we looked into it with the other surrounding property, other municipalities who do allow people who are non-residents to be part of the Parks and Rec Committee. So the recommendation was to bring it to council. So that being said, the motion will be to change is it bylaws for Parks and Rec, or is it the
Charter?
I don't know where it came from.
I don't think it's a charter thing. I've never seen it in our charter, but I'd like to make the recommendation that we change our policy to allow non-residents to be members of the Parks and Rec Committee.
We used to have non-residents, like actual neighbours of the park on the committee, and then at some point along the way, a decision was made, no, it only has to be Wesley Chapel residents, and then people had to leave the committee.
Well, hold on, so there's a motion, do I have a second before we have further discussion?
I'll second it, so we can have discussion.
Okay. So, I can talk a little bit to why. The whys were always, even though it's not a spending body, it's still a recommending body. And some of the council members at the time said, no, why are we having non-residents recommend how to spend tax dollars? You know, so that was the argument. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Well, I think the argument also was that you wouldn't want developers, for example, to be allowed on the planning board. Now, that's something where I would probably say, yeah, I think that's a valid argument. But this is the Parks and Rec Committee. They're not going to be changing the face of the town compared to someone on the planning board or some other position.
Well, I get to appoint them, so.
Well,
The policy is actually, it's a general policy for all committees that non-residents can't be on it. That's where it came from. It was not specifically.
Is it a written policy or is it?
Yeah. It's our
I don't
general
remember
policy.
seeing it, but okay, I apologize. I haven't looked at that for a while.
then I would ask that we change the policy and create a loophole specifically for the Parks and Rec Committee.
That was part of your motion to change the policy, so that would still hold to what Cheryl said, I think.
My thoughts on that would be is kind of opening up a little bit like with the youth council, as well as some of these what's the right word?
Non-residents of the town.
Yeah, but I mean, their effect, there's certainly now with the, what do we call it, the unredistricting that we went through now, we've got new families that are Weddington kids that could repopulate some of the
Schools,
council stuff.
school redistricting, yeah.
But then again, would you want to pay for them to go to YLA when they're not a resident?
I think in some ways we're opening the growth and evolution of this area. I mean, it could be Western Union County. I mean, bringing some collaborative thoughts and, like you're saying, master gardener. If it can benefit Wesley Chapel and they're non-revenue impacting, because ultimately the council, whether you're here, Brad's here, whoever, we're gonna ultimately make the decisions on the spending of the money.
Well, that's what I said, I think that, just to what you're saying, I think there is a separate discussion at the time you're gonna spend money as to whether or not we should be spending money in that instance to pay for a non-resident. Because I think that is more of a direct correlation than the other. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but we gotta keep going.
It was just what
All right,
what we suggested was that it never be no more than 2 non-residents on the committee, so that non-residents never had a majority on the committee, and they come from neighboring communities.
2 out of 7.
So I'll amend my motion to make that stipulation, no more than 2 out of the 7.
Or, well, are we doing this since it's a committee policy, before you amend your motion? We're doing it because it's a committee policy, which applies to all committees, so not all committees are 7, so do we want to make it a majority, so that they're not a majority?
I don't think we want to touch all the committees.
Okay, so do you want to make a specific example, but that's part and parcel of the discussion, because the motion was committees in general, so go ahead.
Well, I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So, number 1, could outside people be referred to Friends of Park and Rec for their involvement? Because they're just as involved. And is there a way to allow these people to be? I don't know, like, so you have like your board and then you have like 2 seats, so you have your 7, but then you have 2 that don't vote on anything, but that are like neighbor seats, like.
Non-voting members?
Right, so you have like, here's our board, and then here are our friendly neighbors, or, I don't know what you call it.
Non-resident member, the
Yeah.
advisory board.
Yeah.
Whatever you think. Now, it was not my intent to make this for all subcommittees or all committees. It was trying to focus on specifically the Parks and Rec. So again, it takes away the issue of the planning board, the youth committee, et cetera.
We don't have that many though. We got Park and Rec, communications.
Well, I think the definition is the clarification there. So you might have people right next door to us here in Blackstone, or people that live in Wesley Oaks that are part of our community, but even though they may be unincorporated Union County, they still live right here, they still visit our park, they still probably use it. There's a Blackstone HOA meeting here this week. So the question is, what your definition of community is? Is it geographical? Is it, whether they pay taxes in Wesley Chapel?
Well, I think once you say non-resident, it's anybody, it's not a resident.
But I don't think the Parks and Rec Committee would recommend someone who lived in Raleigh, for example, just to get them on the committee.
It's an appointed position anyway, so yes.
Right.
Understood. As I said, I get to a point, so it's all my fault. Okay, so,
I think for the focus of the discussion, we focus on the park.
Right, Park and Rec
That comes
Committee.
up, and
okay, so then you had seconded. Do you want to rescind your second so we can amend his motion?
then, that's fine.
Because his motion was not specific to Park and Rec.
So I will rescind my motion and re-motion that it is specific to the Parks and Rec Committee, that it will be specific to up to 2 alternates, or you want to call them alternates, or
2 non-resident members.
2 non-resident members, never to give the Parks and Rec Committee majority outside of Wesley Chapel.
And did you want to include anything on the voting aspect or not?
I don't think so.
Okay, because that was a comment.
No.
Do we have a second? None?
Always second.
Okay. I will ask for a little more discussion again. Anything else? Okay.
I'm all for the betterment of Wesley Chapel. If we can increase our knowledge base and our ability to be great, then go for it.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
Okay.
Motion Motion passes.
Can I ask what your worry would be?
I'm just worried some people are gonna say, these are our tax dollars. We don't want people outside, people not paying taxes to vote how we spend them.
Brad's making all the decisions.
Well, they recommend no. Spending dollars is the council. I only vote if there's a
I
tie.
do think there's always a way to incorporate somebody. I don't think you necessarily have to have a board seat to be involved and be active.
I don't want to go to somebody who's a master gardener in Weddington and say, I want you to leave Weddington and become part of Wesley Chapel.
Why not?
Well,
All right. We've already voted,
okay.
so it's, the motion passes. And we will move on. Item 15 is to call for a closed session per NC General Statute 143-311A4, 318.11A4, sorry, related to the location or expansion of industries and business in the area served by this body. We will also be inviting David Coherence into the session.
Will George be part of that?
Yes, George.
So motion?
Motion. Do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor? Just let me go for motion, close second. Say yes?
Yep.
Okay, you seconded. All right, we will, please excuse us for a moment. If there are any decisions, obviously, we do that in public session, so please be patient with us. Conference room. I don't expect this to be a particularly long discussion, just for those that are here.
Copies of those two items.
Appreciate it.
Closed session?
Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you.
I don't think there's any motions that came out of closed session.
That's correct. So there are none at this time. Let's put it that way. So there are no decisions to come out of closed session.
Skipping 17.
So we're skipping 17, 18. Update on the items from the advance, which I included. I'll just highlight a couple of them. Sorry, I didn't get to the right page. So let's see. Finishing phase 1 of Dogwood Park. That, as you heard tonight, we have the band shell has been approved, the irrigation system has been funded and installed. The band shell should be starting construction next, sometime in the next,
2 weeks.
whatever, 4 to 6 weeks. Within, I said, so. Community events, wasn't it? Conservation zoning is completed. I think that text was developed and approved. The draft land use plan amendment process, we originally were talking about doing that, and I think we've decided that we are not going to have one. That should be a council-initiated action. So a resident, a developer or what have you, cannot necessarily come in and request a land use change. They'll come ask for their normal change and we'll anticipate it. So that one is kind of closed. Communications, create committee, yep, we did it. Facebook, yep, we approved it tonight. So we're moving along. We had some other things on there. Committee is currently 4 members, so we're good there. And folks, no, we already did that. Post office, I can only do that next year. Revisiting the code enforcement process, where we in fact are revisiting it yet again because we've had a change. So we are, and we've already talked to Dr. Robin about that. The fact that we need more consistent follow-up so that we are in accordance with our own process that we develop. So, anybody have any particular questions on anything else there?
I've got one of the things I was tasked with in the retreat was to contact the neighborhoods that do not have 100% occupancy of residents in Wesley Chapel. I went to my neighborhood, Silver Creek's HOA meeting. We've got Blackstone's HOA meeting coming up this week, which I would probably should at least make a comment at the beginning, but the issue that I was warned about is not to aggressively be trying to annex people in to the village of Wesley Chapel, but offering people to join Wesley Chapel. Because we had some issues with that a few years ago.
Correct, you can't essentially promise them anything. You want to be very careful that that don't walk out, that we've said we will allow you to have, 10-foot setbacks when it's 15 foot, or we'll allow you to have commercial, or we'll have you, yes. Correct.
But I am working on that. I contacted Wesley Oaks. I'm not sure when they're doing theirs, but that's the big one that for some reason they won't. Their HOA has not contacted me back.
Was asked about it from, Addison Crossing? Is that who's here? Aniston Grove. They inquired about what the benefit was of joining they had their meeting here too. And I talked to Brad about it. It was basically, you get some input
Into the local government versus the county, but you're also going to pay a tax, but it's a low tax. We are the lowest tax municipality. Sorry, go ahead.
They are apparently straddled or surrounded by Weddington and Wesley Chapel, and they don't really want to be Weddington.
They, however, are not at all in the village, so you would have to look at either 95% or they would have to request a.
Yeah, I told them it was a percentage.
Well, it's currently 95.
I told them that there was a percentage of the neighborhood that would have to join.
The other neighborhoods that Mike is going to, they already have people in the village, so we'll take one or two at a time, whatever we have.
Try to
For example, Silver Creek, my neighborhood, I think is only 8 or 9 houses in the whole 143 homes that are not Wesley Chapel residents. And then Wesley Oaks is about 50-50. So each neighborhood is unique.
And Blackstone, we have just some.
Right.
Okay. Anything else on that advance list? Okay. Just speaking about advance, I wanted to ask Cheryl to start actually looking at dates next year. I think we like to do that in February and March so that we have enough input to go into the budget sessions in April and May. So, assuming we want to have an advance, I'm assuming we do. I think we budgeted for it, didn't we, Cheryl?
We did.
So, okay, so just keep that on the plate so we don't do another, I want to give people more advance notice so we don't do a fire drill again at the end, trying to get people to come. I think we'll get a bigger turnout. The other point for that was whether or not, and I think Mike had brought it up about waiving the, I think, $18, $20, or was it you? Sorry. Amanda's had brought up about waiving the $18 or $20 fee, which just covers the cost. There's no, we don't make any money off that. But so is that something council wants us to continue with? I think we kind of thought about that.
I don't think we
What are we
will.
budgeting for?
I'm not interested in having residents pay to participate. I think they should be able to participate, period, without paying.
I think we just
Well,
need
they
to figure
can,
out.
but it was covering the fee, mostly the food,
Right.
which it doesn't say anywhere that pay, participate, and eat.
I don't think people care
Brad
about
had already
it.
asked me to put something on next month's agenda, and we just kind of have to have an idea of what your logistics are, because, if we invite everybody to come have dinner, 5,000 won't cover it, but if how do you want it, or where do you want it? How many people? Do you want to have, the whole town for a free hot dog, or how is your setup?
Well, I think the dates and the invitation will dictate how many people come, and depending on that, we have some flexibility. We don't have to give them the menu to begin with, for instance. And,
But like when the park had free hot dogs, and I remember they were gone in 30 minutes or whatever, whenever you
Right.
have something,
How'd you guys do it
Cheap.
at the firehouse?
it'll be gone.
How'd you guys do it when you used to have it over at the fire station?
same thing.
We
Just
charged
at
it,
the
it
fire
was a
station.
catered dinner.
We held it when,
And that room is not that big there.
that room is not that big. That's the problem.
When we used to have programs, we did find it helpful to ensure attendance if we charged a small fee. So if you charge people like $5 for their food versus a $20, you can come attend, but $5 if you want to eat. Like charging them a small fee did ensure their attendance.
Yeah, that's a Mac way
So
to
that it
do
does
it.
not come out.
Well, it's true, when you don't order too much food, that's a good point there too.
But the other thing is like, it's hard to find a big space. I've been through.
I still think
At
that's.
SBCC, they're gonna charge you a minimum of 20, so that means if we charge them 5, we're still putting 15 for everybody that comes. So it's just trying to figure out.
But that might be a good idea though, to limit no-shows, because, yeah, that is a concern. That's a valid concern.
I guess the question is, do people want to come more for the food, or do they want to come more to have their opinions heard?
Well, if they don't want to have food, then they don't have to pay. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
We've said that every year. So start looking into it, and then maybe we'll have some more information on it in December. Okay.
And we don't have a bill this year for an MC.
No, we do not. We'll have to work on that. Item 19,
And the facilitator is expensive, you know.
yes,
That will eat up at least $1,000 of
probably
5,000.
1,500.
Yeah.
So we
Especially
have
2 days.
Well, we can see if we can get them down. It's a
I'm
long
gonna
trip down.
continue moving on. Item 19 is discuss the park survey details for future part of grant. I can guess that's you.
John, if you have anything to say here, now would be the time to bring it in. The part of application is a very simple project where every time you do something, you get points for it. The more you put into it, the more points you get. The higher your score, they take the top. You know, if they can only put out grants to the top 10 people with the top 10 scores get the funds. And there is a large advantage to having a survey done, a park-specific survey, so that they know that you've incorporated the residents' input. We've already had 2 public information sessions, which gives us a step up. The survey, again, gives us a good, do you remember how many points off the top of your head? That survey
It is
gives
20
us?
points, I don't remember exactly. It's a big
Significant.
chunk of points, and
Yeah.
our last Parks and Rec survey is too old to get us any points, so basically. we need to-
So the last Parks and Rec survey was done 3 or 4 years before the park opened.
10 years ago.
Yeah, so at least. So we're looking to do another park-specific survey, mailed to residents. We didn't specify distribution.
We're still working on a timeline. We're aiming for the Cardiff deadline in 2019, so it may very well, the expense for any survey will very likely fall in the next fiscal year, not in this fiscal year, but we're just giving you a heads up that it's something we need. Oh, sorry. It's something we're going to need to do if we want to apply in 2019.
I think Parks and Rec's going to work on some questions. They'll be approved by council before it goes out. Do we currently have funds in the budget, Cheryl, for park survey?
I think the only thing you have is for, it's a little more general about the future phase of the park.
Okay. Do we have an idea what the last park survey ran us cost was?
0, because I did it all on my software.
Well,
There was, how was it distributed?
The survey itself, but the mailing and everything else, you've got to mail it out.
We got volunteers to stuff in the mailboxes.
Right, but it still costs you mail charge and all that at some point. What we did.
If you pay it, if you want to get it to residents, and part did tell us, they told Pam and I that they wanted it to go to residents, not to the gardener in Weddington that loves the park but isn't paying for it.
So specifically residents of
Yeah.
Wesley Chapel.
Then you do have to pay for postage and you would have to pay for printing, depending on how big it is. It usually would, it's gonna cost probably $4,000.
I think it's a fair estimate, yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, the
But yes.
$4,000 is the investment on our side.
Yeah.
The backside would be a $50,000 matching grant. So 4,000 in, 5,000, 50,000 out.
The point that it will cost money, but
Question. So you're saying park specific? I know when I was first getting involved in the village, there was a survey done. it wasn't just about the park. So if we did one, could a few questions still be about other things? Or can they only be about the park?
The purpose of the backing of it was gonna be just specific questions, because when we had that problem in the past, we're like, okay, we're gonna ask 30 questions, 10 from parks, 10 from planning board, 10 from council. And then nobody could agree on the questions, nobody could agree on the format, and it turned into a complete and utter chaos. So the idea was to cut out the chaos, which we've done some of that already, but make it a specific park survey. And I like John's idea of making sure that it ends up just the residents of Wesley Chapel's hands by hand delivering them, and volunteers shoving them in mailboxes, that kind of thing. So, but it does, again, for a very nominal cost on the front end, we could potentially end up with $50,000 grant on the back end. And I think that would carry over into the 2020 commercial.
It'd still be good should we apply for another grant in 2020. I think it's like a 5-year limit on your survey delay.
But the whole part of the process, you get so many points for so many things you do. And certainly the survey is a big portion of that.
And who tallies the survey? Does it have to be an independent party?
Sorry?
Does it
No.
have to be tallied by an independent party?
Well, last time I used some software I have, that's survey software for designing surveys and analysing the data.
And would you let people apply online? Or do it online? Or you gonna let people?
The software I have, you can't do it online, you have to have a hard copy, and then the laborious part is all the data input. Last time we used some students to input all the data.
Well, let's see what they come back with in terms of what they want to do and how many questions, and then we can go from there. We can have more discussion about that.
So I don't think there's a motion.
Consider that as well with, when you talk with Park and Rec about the online side.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a problem with the online side because we don't have all the addresses. So, you have to email people too. That's always been the problem. But maybe that will improve the communications, and I still doubt if you get everybody. So, but the alternative helps. Then you've got to be able to say, okay, did they apply online and give you a physical copy, and did they only apply once online? But those are all questions that I think we can tackle.
I used to do some evaluation at work too, so I'd be happy to be part of some of those conversations.
Agreed. Yeah, audience, make my work. Thank you. Okay, anything else on that?
So no motion or anything,
No.
just heads up to council.
Information. Thank you. Item 20 is a resolution 2018-06 to adopt code of ordinances and motion to approve updates annually or semi-annually. Cheryl, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we finally got our code of ordinance, and this is what it looks like. And I asked George about how to adopt it, and he suggested a simple resolution, such as what we have before you tonight. And the code will have to be updated on an ongoing basis. We've already had ordinances that were approved since this was done, like the conservation subdivisions. So we either need to update probably every 6 months or every year.
How much does it cost?
Depends on how many pages. You know, sometimes you can do a simple change, but if it changes 50 pages, then, you know, it can be more costly. So it's hard to say. Since we haven't gone through it, I really don't know.
But given it's one of the things we're required to do by state statute, we put off, when I was one of us, put it off, the codification of ordinances, and now we have it done. I think we need to, because what do we pay for that?
About
10,000.
15,000.
15?
It was a lot.
To keep it updated, and I think it makes sense, otherwise we're throwing away 15,000. So, I'm trying to think of how many ordinance changes we have, text amendment changes we have a year, probably 10 to 12, that many?
Maybe.
And as we're cleaning them up, I mean, Robin is finding stuff every time she turns around.
Hopefully, I think our pace will probably pick up in the next year or two because she's here and
Again, I'm trying to think of from a cost standpoint, if it makes sense to answer your question semi-annually, annually. It's like something else. It's like if you build two projects, if you build them separate times apart, you pay this other charge for, what do they call it? Setup or whatever all over again, in addition to the cost of the actual cost.
I don't know
of the
about the setup, but just like, take for instance, definitions was always a big section in our old book.
Yes.
And when y'all would do an amendment, you would change in a definition that started with B for barn and then one for R for recreational facilities.
Right.
All of a sudden I'd have 60 pages, I forget, 80 pages,
Mhm.
that just got all out of whack, so we'd have to redo it. So, you know, if you do it less often, it'll be less costly because like definitions, instead of redoing them twice a year, you're only going to redo them once a year if you only update once a year. So, I mean, it is cheaper if you do it once a year. It's just that you won't have everything updated in the book.
And how would that work?
That's
Like
true,
the-
so you can't update it, I'm sorry.
How would that work? Like I come in, I want to apply for something, and I want to look at the ordinance. Where is it going to be up to date at?
That's the problem. Online, you'll have the latest version that was approved, which would
And then I
make,
can post the ordinances since then.
Okay.
You would have to do a little work to figure it all out. yeah.
well, when they came to talk to Dr. Urban, then she would tell them, okay, here's what's changed as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, there's a couple places to catch it, but your point's well taken, so.
The other thing we need to discuss is, compared to the way we've done things in the past, is the books will be distributed to all the council members. And I don't think that's the plan for moving forward.
Right. With the new setup, I did kind of a survey on the clerk's list as to what other people do, and it seemed like the most common was for, the planner has to have a copy and the clerk has to have a copy, and then to give one copy to the mayor, one copy to the planning board chair, and then we would have a few more copies that if somebody really wanted to check it out for a week, or 3 weeks, because they were researching something or doing something, you could do that.
But it's also online.
It would be online, and I can, send a PDF to you too, but yeah, that luxury of having the book right there, they're very hard to keep up.
And I like the PDF idea because you can do a search then, which you can't do in our current ordinance. It drives me crazy.
There is some nice things in the back too, where it has a reference to all the old ordinances, so you can go, if it was the firearms ordinance 2008, I think it is, you can look it up here and find out where it is in the code.
Are we completely paid up to the convocation?
We're paid up, so the
Okay.
next thing would be when we get it updated.
Okay?
Capital charges.
Because we paid for that in stages, right? Over 3
Yeah,
years.
it was like, 40%, 40%, and I think 30%.
Okay.
Okay, so I need a motion to adopt resolution 2018-06 to adopt the code of ordinances. I guess I'll do them separately.
So motion?
Okay. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Thank you. And then the second part is, do we want to do it annually or semi-annually? So I need a motion on that, to approve updates annually, semi-annual.
I think with all the work that we've got going on, I think once a year is,
Let's try it.
it's fine. If we find stuff slipping through the cracks. So I'll motion that it be annually.
Okay, I have a motion for annually. Do I have a second?
One second.
Would you?
Any further discussion?
My only thing was maybe semi-annually here for, since Robin's here and there's new eyes looking at this, and it seems like there's new discoveries and findings coming out imminently of maybe for this first year semi-annually that, hey, there's 2 updates that, or whatever, and then we transition over to an annual once things get to
I know there's going to be things that she
Stabilize.
specifically wants to look at to potentially make suggestions for changes, but
so the next 6 months.
But when I think of the process, it's going to take 6 months per,
Yeah,
in some cases.
I'm good with whatever you guys.
So
I guess the question would be, if we're doing it annually, based on what fiscal year?
Yes, fiscal year.
So once a year.
Fiscal years, you're talking about?
Well, I think it was an issue that I'm looking to see if there's a date as of maybe May. So, yeah, the first update will follow this fiscal year.
I purposely would like to make it not the anniversary of the fiscal year because it's so chaotic with the fiscal year. Do it sometime off the
Well,
anniversary.
you're gonna have to budget for it, that's the only thing, my only point to that, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we just have to make sure we budget. But other than that, okay, so,
So, Paul, would you rather do it every 6 months?
I mean, that would be my choice, but
What you're saying, Cheryl, that the first change would be in May?
Well, I would think we would probably want to update
well,
it
that would be
as
annual from when it
April,
was
May,
first.
somewhere.
So would that give Robin a chance to get comfortable in her position, review the ordinances, and make a recommendation by May of next year?
No, because by the time it has to go through planning board and through public hearing.
we'll do annual.
I wish she was here to ask her if she thought a 6 month or annual.
Well, let's do an annual, the motion was for annual.
Well,
We can still ask Rob, Dr. Robin, and then make a change to it if we need to, but I'd like to at least have something in place.
we have it every
And
6
I'm looking
months.
at the contract, because I'm not sure, well, here it says, this agreement shall automatically renew itself from year to year, except either party may alter or cancel at any time upon 30 days written notice, so.
You're still paying for it, so it doesn't.
So, I mean, we could do something, I guess, and then we can change it
That's
after,
what I mean.
It's,
How much does it
Hard to
cost
predict.
every year?
it just
Okay.
depends on how many pages.
Yeah, they won't
Right.
give you a set fee, no. All right, our motion was for annual. I want to start the discussion, do we want to change it, or do I call for the vote?
If we say every 6 months, can we just say it's been 6 months, we're not going to make any change?
Can we say what?
If
We
say-
don't have any in 6 months, or we only have 1 or 2, we don't want to do it 6, I don't know. If we didn't have updates at the end of a
I don't
6-month
think,
period.
I mean, I don't think you would be paying much. Let's see exactly how they charge
You want
you.
to try it for a year at 6 months and then switch it to annually? I'm asking.
I like the idea of a year personally, but, I understand Paul's comment, but I'm still thinking year. But
Can we put this off to the next meeting?
do we have to have a decision on that?
We can wait, yeah, we can wait.
Or
And
can
let
we
me see
make
if
it
I can find out
contingent
more.
on what Robin thinks would be prudent? That we
Works for me.
Table? So I'll withdraw my,
You always say contingent upon Robin,
Yeah,
so
we just-
you can make a motion to approve either a 6-month or an annual, semi-annual or annual based upon what our planning and zoning administrator feels is appropriate.
Well, now, she has not actually worked with this before, because when she was in Marvin, they had not codified.
I understand, but
I guess
the question would be based more on how, that she really, I don't know if she would have an idea of how much changes we would have over the 6 months or a year. Feel for that, but she might, I don't know.
Right now, you have a motion and a second. If you just rescind them, and let me find out more from the company.
yeah, I would,
Fine, so,
And move it to November. I mean.
you want to rescind? You're a second?
I rescind.
I'll rescind my motion, and instead of making a condition of the motion, just
To wait, yeah.
withdraw
Let's
it
get more info.
until, put it off, we'll put it on the agenda, Cheryl, specifically for December.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Oops. Okay, council comments. Start, where did I start last time? I don't know. Amanda?
I'm gonna talk to y'all about, talking to Brandon about an alarm ordinance, because we have so many. But he said that the lady cannot pull a report and give us based on address. But she did do a little more research and found out that in 2016, she estimated there were 17 false alarms, and 2017 there were 20 false alarms. That doesn't really seem,
That's Not huge.
It's kinda
One a
small.
month, 1.5 a month.
So I don't know that it would be really worth our time to write an ordinance and try to enforce it.
Is that something Brandon wanted us to do?
Well, they did talk about it.
It was a comment from the Indian Trail side where they've got a lot more commercial.
They talked about generating revenue to help pay for
Yeah.
their officer.
It's 17 a year when you generate.
Yeah. The other question I would ask is if they gave you statistics on whether it was repeat offenders or just random
Yeah,
17
she
people
didn't have
versus the
that.
same guy 17 times in a row. That, if it was the same business or same home, you know, false alarms repeatedly, I'd go after that one guy, but without an ordinance, you can't do that. So,
But we don't know that yet.
I can ask him, even if it's something they track in-house and don't tell us
Mhm.
identification.
Okay.
They can tell who it is, repeat, like if they can tell, if it's a
Repeat
repeated
offenders.
repeater.
Sure, of the 20, was it 4 addresses?
mhm.
That would tell us something. Okay, that's a fair point. Anything else? Okay.
Well, I don't have much, just the leadership union program's wrapped up. The graduation will be Wednesday, the 15th. So it's been a good learning experience. Thursday, yeah, sorry. So,
It's okay.
so it's been a great experience. I mean, certainly a lot of good practices. It may not be readily apparent on the surface level, but it's been, I think, good for the town. I would highly recommend it to you guys. I don't think anybody wanted to do it this year, but certainly look into it.
Can you speak at all to the Chamber of Commerce Red Carpet Gala coming up?
Don't know much about it. I know that's their big event. There's probably 500 people that'll, from the county, that attend. I mean, it's what it is. It's their big gala, so
I mean, is it just, here's a thank you dinner for participating this year, or is there, I guess, what's
it's
the
a celebration for business in Union County of the business of the year for Chamber, just everything that goes on internally there. Like I said, I haven't been. I've heard it's incredibly well put together. Again, celebration for their membership group of people in the community. So I'll have to report when I get back, I guess.
Cheryl, if we all go to that, that's not considered a formal council, right? That's a social,
As long as you don't talk about town business.
okay? Because I was kind of on the
Isn't there a
fence.
fee to it?
What's that?
Isn't there a fee?
There is a fee for,
We're members, are we not?
yeah, but there's
Still
a
a
fee,
fee.
just like the
Retreat?
retreat, yes. Something they have the Ag Center, through the whole thing. So I think the tickets are like $50.
I'll be honest.
Okay. Are you going?
That's part of the overall leadership union piece, so there's no extra cost for that, so. I don't
Anything else,
bring a
Paul?
date, if I bring a date, it's $50.
Anything else, Paul?
No, I'm good. I do have to run, I do apologize.
Yes, I know you said you need to go.
Mine's really short. One, everybody should see our new seals that Brad and I put up last week or the week before. There's 3 of them, one in the main lobby, one in this business lobby, and then one on the council here. If you zoom in on that and get a nice tight shot of our new seal, it turned out great. And the way it's up there, I don't think we ever have to worry about it falling on Brad's head.
Lawsuit.
Exactly. The other thing is when John and I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, specifically related to parks, there was a lot of people had really nice maps of their parks. And one of the things that I would be looking into and bringing into council probably next month is an estimate of doing a really nice architectural rendering of Dogwood Parks, and we can use that for publications and for event flyers, things like that. I have no idea what the costs are, but I'm just now looking into it, and we bring that to council here probably next month.
Should wait till the band shows up. Okay.
Well, right, we're gonna plan as if the band shell's already there, but we'd like a map. So we're setting up vendor booths, and when we're handing out maps to let people know where things are, and things like that, we can, well, the map we have now is hand-drawn by one of the people from Friends of Parks and Rec, and it's nice, and it works, but it's not the really nice, high-end architectural rendering that everybody else has. So I'm gonna research that and bring that back to council next month.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. Two things for me, again, very short items. One is related to the seal itself. Angela Lubinecki, who's the artist who designed it. She also did the cover of the pamphlet on the history of Wesley Chapel document. I can't remember his name now that wrote it. But anyway, and she also did the T-shirts for the 5K run the youth council did. So she was here this evening. We may get an article in the local papers just to say, you know, we've had an improvement, you know, the great work that Angela's done, and wanted to acknowledge that, as well as the second part kind of goes along with it, which is I have had some conversations. Deb Bledsoe does some photography work, and so of taking some shots from around town, and then I was getting them framed, and we paid for the whole thing. I mean, so we could put in, you know, shots of the park, shots of maybe some of the farming areas, shots of whatever, the town hall, and you know, whatever, and we could have them up on the walls and start making this place look like we live here. So, even though we may not want to live here that long, hours-wise, but anyway, so I'm gonna, you know, ask her to look into that, see if she can come up with some kind of rough estimate what that will cost. Anyway, I'd like to, you know, start sprucing things up a little bit more. There she is, actually.
I'll talk about another idea, an extension of that may be able to power some of the Facebook stuff early on. Maybe have some external community members. Maybe have an online kind of voting kind of process of, I don't know.
What to put up there, you mean, like? Or?
No, if they just, hey, have residents have photographs of the tape, just have.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you blow it up, it has to be of a quality
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
able to show the definition, but, yeah, I mean, not a bad idea. Even if we like the image, we could still have someone with quality equipment. We do it.
Even if it's a smaller collage thing of, hey, it's community equity in the building.
Where I used to live, they used to do a rotation in the front lobby for the local high school to do artwork, and it would change every few months. Giving kids the opportunity to put artwork up at the town hall
It
too.
wouldn't be a bad idea to, yes.
The communications committee has taken over the lobby as far as being in charge of what goes in those cases. And that would be an excellent, we're going to put on Facebook, ask people to send us their pictures, because we'd love to have some old pictures in there to frame and such. And also student artwork, we're going to reach out to some schools and see if they want to do that. So
The lady at the Monroe Library has a section specifically on Wesley Chapel. It's not a big section, but she has stuff, history.
that's what we're
You
looking
could do a
for.
piece on the Wesley Chapel Speedway. There used to be a dirt track right over here. Yeah. Quarter mile.
Okay.
I do have to run a motion.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? So a second? We already had a motion. Also
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
I gotta get to Monroe by 9:15.
Oscar, will
You'll
you?
make it.
9:15? Good luck.
Don't put your headphone on. So I know we're gonna have a light turnout with weather.